What if the controversy surrounding the World Cup final is much bigger than anyone expected? And what if the next official update could finally answer the questions that have been circulating among Argentina and Spain supporters? There has been growing attention around a reported complaint involving the Argentine national team, the World Cup final, FIFA, and the Court of Arbitration for Sport, also known as CAS. But before we go any further, there is one extremely important point. We need to separate what is officially confirmed from what is only being claimed or discussed. Because when it comes to a case this serious, one small detail can completely change the story. So what exactly is happening? What has Argentina reportedly submitted? What could FIFA and CAS actually decide? And most importantly, could anything realistically happen to the result of the World Cup final? Let's go through everything carefully. According to the claims surrounding this situation, Argentina has already submitted documentation connected to its complaint about events that allegedly occurred during the World Cup final. The complaint reportedly raises questions about certain circumstances surrounding the match. Those questions could involve refereeing decisions, the conduct of the match, or allegations of possible irregularities. But there is a major difference between making an allegation and proving that allegation. That distinction is extremely important. A complaint can be submitted, evidence can be presented, questions can be raised, but none of those things automatically mean that FIFA or CAS will agree with the complaint. Before any serious sporting or legal consequence could happen, the relevant authorities would need to examine the evidence and determine whether the allegations are supported by facts. And that is where the situation becomes complicated. Imagine, for example, that a national team submits a formal complaint after a major tournament. The authorities cannot simply look at the complaint and immediately announce a completely different result. They would have to review the documents. They would have to consider the available evidence. They would have to hear from the relevant parties. And depending on the nature of the allegations, they could potentially request additional information. That could include reports connected to the match, official documentation, referee information, or responses from organizations involved in the competition. Only after examining the relevant material could a responsible authority determine whether there is actually a case to answer. And this is why the idea that the World Cup title has already changed hands should be treated very carefully. At this stage, it would be misleading to present that as an established fact without an official ruling. The same applies to claims that the final will definitely be replayed. A replay would be an extraordinary consequence. It would require a clear legal and sporting basis. It would not simply happen because one team filed a complaint. And that brings us to one of the biggest questions being asked by fans. Could Argentina actually force a replay of the World Cup final? The answer is that nobody should assume that outcome before an official decision is published. There are many possible outcomes whenever a formal sporting complaint is examined. The authorities could reject the allegations. They could determine that there was insufficient evidence. They could request additional information. They could open or continue a disciplinary review. Or they could potentially identify issues that require further action. Everything depends on the evidence and the applicable rules. And that is why the documentation becomes so important. If Argentina has submitted evidence supporting its position, that material would need to be evaluated carefully. The same principle applies to the other side. If another organization or party is accused of wrongdoing, it should have the opportunity to respond and provide relevant information. This is a fundamental part of any serious investigation. It is not enough to simply say that something happened. There must be evidence capable of supporting the claim. And if the allegations involve something as serious as match manipulation, the standard of scrutiny would be even more important. Match manipulation is an extremely serious allegation. It cannot responsibly be presented as fact simply because it appears in a complaint or because supporters believe something unusual happened. There would need to be credible evidence. There would need to be an examination of the circumstances. And there would need to be an official finding. Until that happens, viewers should be careful with sensational claims circulating online. Now, let's talk about FIFA and CAS. These organizations have different roles and responsibilities. FIFA governs international football and has its own regulations and disciplinary structures. CAS, meanwhile, is an independent sports arbitration institution that handles disputes involving sports organizations and athletes under its jurisdiction. So when people hear the words FIFA and CAS together, it does not automatically mean that both organizations have already reached a final decision. Their involvement depends on the specific legal and procedural circumstances of the case. That is another reason why headlines claiming that everything has already been decided can be misleading. There is a huge difference between a case being submitted, a case being reviewed, and a final ruling being issued. Those are three completely different stages, and fans should know which stage the case is actually in. Now let's consider the possibility of additional evidence. If authorities believe that more information is necessary, they could potentially seek documentation from relevant parties. That could help establish what happened before, during, or after the match. Again, this does not mean that wrongdoing has been proven. It simply means that investigators may need enough information to reach a properly supported conclusion. And this is probably the most important part of the entire story. The final outcome should be based on evidence, not emotions, not social media speculation, not fan arguments, and not viral videos without context. Because when the subject is the World Cup, emotions can become extremely intense. Argentina supporters naturally want answers. Spain supporters would also want the same level of fairness. And football fans around the world deserve a process that is transparent and based on the relevant rules. That brings us back to the biggest question. What happens to the World Cup title if serious irregularities are actually proven? That would depend entirely on the findings and the regulations applicable to the situation. There is no responsible way to guarantee a specific outcome before the authorities have reached a final conclusion. It could lead to disciplinary consequences. It could lead to further investigation. It could potentially result in other measures depending on what is established. But saying that the trophy has already been taken away or that a replay has already been ordered would be premature without an official announcement confirming it. And this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because the biggest development may not be the final decision itself. It may be the evidence and reasoning that lead to that decision. If an official ruling is eventually published, fans will be able to examine exactly what was accepted, what was rejected, and why. That could answer many of the questions currently circulating online. Was there enough evidence to support Argentina's allegations? Were the disputed incidents significant enough to trigger further action? Were the relevant regulations followed? And ultimately, does the existing World Cup result remain unchanged? Those are the questions that actually matter. For now, the safest conclusion is simple. Argentina's reported complaint deserves to be discussed based on evidence and official information. But until a final ruling is publicly confirmed, nobody should present an alleged outcome as a fact. And that includes claims that Argentina has already been declared the rightful World Cup champion. It also includes claims that Spain has already lost the title. And it includes claims that the final has definitely been ordered to be replayed. Those are major conclusions. They require major evidence. So if you see a headline saying that FIFA has already handed the World Cup to Argentina, stop for a moment. Ask yourself one question. Where is the official ruling? If there is no official document or statement confirming that claim, then it should be treated as speculation rather than established fact. The same principle applies to every side of this controversy. And if an official announcement does arrive, that is when the situation can be properly analyzed. We can look at the exact decision. We can examine the reasoning behind it. We can understand what it means for Argentina. We can understand what it means for Spain. And we can finally determine whether the World Cup result is affected in any way. Until then, the story remains one that requires patience and careful attention. Because sometimes the biggest difference between a real breaking news development and an internet rumor is simply one official document. So now I want to hear what you think. If an investigation were to establish serious irregularities surrounding a World Cup final, what should happen? Should the original result remain untouched? Should disciplinary action be taken? Should the authorities consider extraordinary measures? Or should the case simply be closed if the evidence does not meet the required standard? Let me know your opinion in the comments. And remember, the most important thing is to distinguish confirmed information from speculation. If a genuine official ruling is released, the details will matter. Not the rumors, not the headlines, not the theories, the actual decision. So stay tuned for the latest confirmed developments surrounding Argentina, Spain, FIFA, CAS, and this extraordinary World Cup controversy. Because if an official decision does arrive, it could finally answer the questions that football fans have been asking. What really happened? Was the complaint supported by enough evidence? And most importantly, does anything actually change about the World Cup final? That is the question everyone will be watching. And until the official answer arrives, the story is not finished.